St. Petersburg City Council Committee of the Whole meeting for May 19th, 2022. Council members, we have an agenda before us for today's meeting. I'll entertain a motion for approval.
Move approval.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. We have two items of new business today. We'll begin with our downtown mobility study presented by Evan Morey, Transportation and Parking Management Director, and Whit Blanton, Forward Pinellas Executive Director. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning. Thank you, Council, for having us here today. I'm going to give a brief introduction. Whit will move us through most of the slides. And at the end of the presentation, we would like to answer questions that you may have. And if it's the will of the body, the direction we're looking for today would be a recommendation to move a vote upstairs for full council to accept the study and to endorse the action plan. So the action plan is what we're concentrating on today. We've met with council in the past. Obviously, we have a couple of new council members on. We're not going to have time to go through all the details, but we're trying to hit the highlights and really concentrate on the action plan because that's the aspect of where do we go from here. And what you'll see is that this analysis was traffic analysis, it was public input, testing, modeling of traffic. Will things work, will they not work? But each of the main projects that we have recommended to go forward are complex, major projects in terms of 3rd and 4th Street, 8th and ML King, and 175 in particular. And due to that complexity, the next steps would be additional reviews, additional studies, additional public input. So there's not necessarily a final decision today on whether a project moves forward to completion, but there is a decision we're looking for general support to take it to that next level of effort, that next level of review, that there's interest in moving these things forward. And then we can take it to that next step and make design decisions such as, okay, for 3rd and 4th Street, if we two-way that, exactly what's the configuration of 3rd Street? What's the configuration of 4th Street in terms of how many lanes are northbound, how many lanes are southbound, how do we accommodate bikes, that sort of thing. So with that perspective, I would like to thank Whit and his team. Christina Mendoza is here, Cheryl Stacks on my team is here, and there's been a lot of work that's gone into this over the last couple of years. Great partnership. As you can see on the slide here, this was a work effort and a funding effort by the FDOT, City of St. Petersburg, and Forward Pinellas. And we've been fortunate to get a lot of Whit's time on this, and he's taken over as the project manager after Sarah Capehart moved on to Hillsborough County. A while ago, she was the original project manager on it. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started, and I'll turn it over to you, Whit.
Okay. Well, thank you, Madam Chair and council members, for the opportunity to be here today. I do want to just echo briefly Evan's statement. When we began this project, we sat down with the Florida Department of Transportation, and we said we wanted to do this the right way. We wanted to do this deliberately and in a measured way so that we build trust and confidence and support as we go along. We're not rushing anything. It takes a while to get transportation projects done, especially major transportation projects involving the state highway system. So we just wanted to be deliberate in that. This is not new for most of you, but the study goals were really to look at how St. Petersburg is growing, how can it expect to grow, and how it can continue to support a thriving downtown, particularly with a transportation system that evolves with the downtown. And part of what we wanted to do here was to define what our mobility goals are, our safety goals for downtown, to test different network configurations that enhance mobility, safety, and accessibility, and then identify projects that can be advanced that support those goals. Where do I advance here? This one here. Thank you. So we did, I think, our due diligence and laying the groundwork for how this might work as a long-term set of strategies to guide the city over the next 25 to 30 years at a minimum. So we looked at population and employment projections, and we did take a deep dive early in the project to ensure that our countywide estimates were accurate in downtown, and we found that they were low, actually. So we adjusted our projections of population and employment upwards to account for the pier, to account for Tropicana Field, the Innovation District, things that we knew at the time in 2020 were happening. The city has since gone through a 2050 visioning effort and has refined some of those numbers, but we feel like our population and employment projections for downtown are still ahead of what the 2050 projections are for the entire city. So we're confident this is an accurate forecast of about 15,000 additional people and about 13,000 additional jobs in downtown. We know that our countywide projections are low because we only projected about 93 total new population numbers by 2045, and the city is expecting to grow greater than that just in the city of St. Petersburg. But that was done in 2018, so we will take the 2050 plan and update our countywide forecasts. But the bottom line is we feel good about the downtown forecast. We also looked at crash data, we looked at safety analysis, and we found that the one-way pairs did have a higher proportion of traffic crashes, and only 17% of the network is one-way pairs. So that was one of the issues we really wanted to get a handle on. As Evan mentioned, there was a lot of public outreach in two main sequences, one before we developed any alternatives and one after we developed scenarios and alternatives and had tested them and wanted to get the community's feedback on all that. And I feel like during a pandemic and then as the pandemic was ending, we did a very robust job of engaging people virtually and in some cases in person, more in person as things went on. And I think that gave us a lot of visibility to community groups and neighborhood groups and business groups that we wouldn't have necessarily been able to reach if we had to go to all of them in person. So I think it was a win-win to have those virtual meetings as well. And this isn't the end. This is just what guided us to get to this point. So some of our observations and findings is that through our case study research and through our analysis of downtown conditions here in St. Petersburg, that two-way streets generally are safer for all users than one-way streets. They improve business accessibility, and they promote a more livable community through slower speeds, through less emissions reductions, less emissions and things like that. A number of cities have taken a step to reverse or modify some of the decisions made about their highways at the onset of the interstate system in the 1950s and 60s. We were a little bit behind that first wave of interstates being built here in Florida, but a lot of that same design mentality and location mentality went into the interstate system here in St. Petersburg. Through highway design, we think we can significantly reduce some of the conflicts that we see on the local road system in downtown and shift more people into other modes of travel by making them more convenient, more accessible, and more connected. We did have a lot of outreach and engagement with emergency responders of various types and have attempted to incorporate their concerns and ideas and perspectives into our action plan recommendations. And we've heard from them that they feel satisfied that they've been heard throughout this process, and I feel good about that. There's never a transportation project that makes everybody 100% satisfied in every corner. But I think we've done a lot to mitigate some initial concerns and help people feel like they're partners in this process. So I won't comment on every word on this slide, but we can come back and answer any questions that you may have. So our focus today is to walk you through the key projects, and we have broken them down into two main categories, and then within the priority one, we have priority one and priority two. Within the priority one, we have short, mid, and long-term projects. For the 175 corridor, we elevated this into the priority one area, as we discussed last time we were before you, because it does not as readily affect the design plans that are funded for I-275, which is a major project for the region as well as St. Petersburg, and modifying that northern interchange with 375 could potentially affect the timing and advancement of that plan. However, 175 is supported by the Florida Department of Transportation in some level to the point where they have committed funding to help us do an engineering evaluation of 3 scenarios at a minimum: a no-build, a modification or conversion to create either a boulevard or a viaduct, and potentially to cap 175. These other options would allow you to maintain the capacity and traffic flow in this corridor, and really the only thing that would reduce the same level of capacity would be if we were to, with an overpass or a viaduct, to shrink the number of lanes, which the department thinks is feasible, or to turn it into a boulevard or something like that. They will evaluate that, and then once they determine what's feasible and there's no red flags, then we would engage the public in understanding what the public supports in terms of those different options. So it's kind of a two-phased approach. So they have that scope of services ready, they've engaged a consultant, and that work should begin, or actually has begun, at a technical level and should be completed in the next several months. What this, and I think I've covered most of these points: no build scenario, modification and removal, and those 3 alternatives will evaluate level of service, traffic flow, delay, and there's a lot of engineering design here that would point to some kind of things that can't be done, and how it ties into the interchange, because there has to be, there is a difference in elevation between I-275 and 175, so that has to be taken into account. So there's some geometrics that need to be considered here. In addition to that, we want to be ready for whatever next design phase comes by looking at the land use, urban design, and equity in the area, and have a community-driven effort with the adjoining neighborhoods and businesses that are affected to assess how we would use any reallocated space in this corridor. For instance, even if we maintain the interstate spur, we might need to only have 2 lanes in each direction, which could free up several 100,000 square feet of usable space. What that is used for, whether that be for buildings, housing, or other types of amenities for the community, is to be determined. And so we're in the process now of looking at potential funding options for that. One of those potential options will be advertised for funding, I believe, later this month or early next month, and that is the Reconnecting Communities program from the federal government, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. This is a competitive grant, and there is money for both construction and planning. We don't think we're ready for construction money, but we do think we're ready for planning money that could augment and complement the Florida Department of Transportation's efforts, because, you know, when DOT does things, they're going to look at it from a roadway standpoint and a right-of-way standpoint, and they will evaluate environmental and community impacts, but not in the same way as figuring out what to do with any space that might transfer to the city of St. Petersburg with modification. So that's what this would be for, and we think we're positioned well to be competitive for this kind of funding. Turn it over to Evan.
Thank you. So for speaking about the reconnecting communities and why we think this may be a good eligible project, I just wanted to call back in a slide that we've used in previous presentations. This dates back to 2016 when the city conducted a Tropicana Field master plan study, actually 2 studies, one version with and one without a stadium. And this was one of the slides from one of the public meetings that just depicted how the interstate spurs and 275 itself can cause a barrier around downtown. And it's apparent that 375 needs to remain as is for a while, at least, and there's no plans to make any modifications to I-275. But the 175 spur could be changed that would reduce this barrier, and that's one reason why we think it would be eligible for that federal funding. This slide shows the elevation and the width of the interstate spur between Tropicana Field and Campbell Park. 4th and 5th Avenue South are state roads as well as the interstate, and it's 8 lanes wide when you take into consideration the shoulders that are on each side. 450 feet wide in total, so it's quite wide, takes up a lot of real estate, and perhaps some of that could be repurposed. This is an aerial from the 1960s, before the interstate spur was built. We overlaid and shaded in the interstate, basically the aerial after. So you can see within the yellow line, the 450-foot width, and the homes and the businesses that were displaced. And this is just between 16th Street and ML King Street. And besides the barrier that was created from our discussions with the community, from people who had families, who had homes or businesses in here, or may have actually lived through this themselves, an important point is the displacement of those homes and businesses, and of course we can't bring those back, but that ties in one reason why not only do we want to look at better connections, but could we bring in affordable housing, could we bring in some businesses and not replace what was there before, but start to try to improve that. And you can't undo the past, but you can try to make good decisions for the future. And so back to you, Whit.
Okay. So once we get through this initial engineering evaluation and some conceptual alternatives and have a game plan, we would have to move into a more formal process depending on what the result is. And that's a project development environmental study that would then look more in detail at how you build it and to come up with a design for the facility. Other midterm actions would include, what are we going to do with the land? How do we address 4th and 5th Avenue two-way conversion? And then look at the intersection or interchange modification for 175 and 275. What might need to happen there? And there's a whole host of options that could be evaluated in terms of new access points with I-275 that would provide better connectivity in that part of downtown. That can be considered as part of the I-275 design or as part of this potential interchange modification that would happen. And again, transportation takes a while to get things done, so long-term, we would see any design, engineering, right-of-way, and construction for 175 most likely beyond 7 years and sometime between 7 and 15 years. Now, that's different than I-275, which I think is on a faster track to improve I-275, because that's already in a design bid build phase. So all of this, every project is really following a similar pattern of we are looking at a very high level of just what traffic will do, and that is only really one component of it, and then we've gotten public input based on what the traffic will do, but there's a whole host of signal modifications, street reallocation, space usage that have to be considered, and that will all be enveloped within a very robust public engagement process. And we've just listed a few examples of some things that would be considered where we would like the public to tell us what they think and how they can guide this before there's any shovels turned or ground dug up. So we have tried to follow a very deliberate process, and your action potentially at the city council level would be a precursor for the MPO as Forward Pinellas to take any action to signal to the Florida Department of Transportation that we're ready to move forward. FDOT has been very clear that removal or substantial modifications to the interstate needs to have more support than, say, just a city council vote. It needs to be something where they hear from the community, they hear from the MPO, it's a county-wide priority, as well as a community-wide priority. And we're in the process of doing that now. So you're a first step, and then later this summer, the Forward Pinellas Board will be asked to accept the action plan as well. So thank you for your time, and Evan and I are happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much. It's been discussed for quite some time, the benefits of taking I-175 down to grade, creating a boulevard there. First and foremost, it eliminates a wall, a barrier between Campbell Park and the Trop site. that if we did have that photo, it really paints the true picture of what the mistakes of the past look like. Okay? You guys have, through your studies, through your community conversations, through the work that FDOT has done on this, you've really gotten it down to a science. And the numbers are very telling. The 40% capacity of I-175 isn't really going to change. And in fact, it might be used even more as a boulevard, because then you have that ground level access to so many other streets, which is good for business and good for the community. Being able to do something like a mix of that boulevard with affordable housing would be a big win for us. And those elements can help to bridge this divide that is physically in place right now. But it creates some economic opportunity that just is impossible right now. I do think that the plans for this and the trop redevelopment need to complement one another. Doesn't have to be all rolled into one. I could see some problems with that. But if we're moving forward on this now, these two concepts can dovetail to create an extension of that master plan that will further help to bridge that divide. Regarding changing some of the one-way streets to two-way streets, as a 16-year downtown resident, I have lots of experience by car and on foot, by bike and by scooter, getting around downtown. And so I was there when we changed 2nd Street from one way to two, and I thought the sky was falling. Everybody was so worried about how that was just going to be crazy. Same thing with 2nd Avenue South. The biggest change was that I had to look both ways before crossing the street. Pretty simple. And now, with those streets, you never even think about what it looked like before. I live on 4th Avenue South, which is currently a one-way street. And I can tell you that not only is it underutilized as a two-lane, it's 2 lanes where I am, and I can sit on my porch and watch cars speeding through that area. And I'm tired of it. Two-way streets are safer streets. And that will be something that I'm fully supportive of as a resident as well as a city council member, because I've seen for myself for many years what the differences are, the before and after all around downtown, where we have made those changes and where we haven't. So that's one of the things I'm most excited about with this. It is going to be better for business, as anyone who has to loop around to get to Publix can tell you.
Or my parking.
You know, yeah, like it's safe, yeah, or where Councilmember Curtis parks to go to work. It'll save you a couple of minutes. The increase in the population and the available housing that's downtown is actually a step toward reducing car dependency, because many of the people who are moving downtown and live there currently use their cars much less. Many of the people who want to move downtown want to be there because it's closer to their job and they want to be able to walk to work. So I don't really see a strong connection between increased downtown population and increase traffic congestion outside of downtown. If anything, those are the kinds of moves that help to relieve traffic congestion. Evan, I would like you to send, if you can find that photo, if you could send that to council.
Yes.
When you all see that photo, and you've seen it before, but I need to use that as an exclamation point, an underline, bold, italic, 18-point font. That picture tells you everything you need to know about why we need to change that. I call it a wall. It's from that level, it's not a street. It doesn't do anything but separate people in our city. And this is a great opportunity. I'm just thrilled that FDOT is on board with this. What do they need from us to move forward? You talked about that they have prepared a scope of work or scope of services for the next phase. It sounds like that involves more community input. Is that what they need directly at this point? What are some ways that we can help them get what they need next?
Well, I think from a procedural standpoint is acting on the action plan, accepting this and endorsing the action plan would be important. But from a next phase scope of work standpoint, what the department has told us is that they're breaking this into two primary tasks. The first is a technical engineering feasibility analysis that will look for fatal flaws, things like how you transition from the interchange, which we don't want to remove at 175 and 275, but how you transition from that interchange into the community, because there's some geometrics. You can't just stop it. You know, there's a ramp that you need to have.
Right,
So,
and the ramp can only be so steep.
yeah, so when we talk about converting to a boulevard or even a viaduct, you know, those geometrics will dictate how far you have to go. So maybe you still need a ramp all the way to 8th or 9th. I don't know. That's what we'll need to look at. Once they vet that internally, there won't be a lot of public input at that level. Then they'll bring what they think are feasible, achievable concepts for the community and pros and cons associated with that. And then that's when we'll kick off another round of community engagement. And their task, too, would be to explore that. So they have the budget and we'll complement their public outreach and engagement, make sure it's done right. We'll work with city staff to make sure there's broad engagement in that effort. But this first step is really just a technical task, and they're underway on that already.
Okay, great. And as far as having conversations with different groups, gathering letters of, position letters from different groups, there could be some that everyone doesn't always think of immediately. I'd be happy to review any list of contacts or organizations and see if there are any I could suggest to add. Then, as far as the Reconnecting Communities pilot program, I was just reading about this recently, really excited about it, thought of this. For the competitive grant, so is the grant something that the city does, Forward Pinellas does, or something that we apply for jointly?
I would say jointly would be the best strategy, but I don't know the details. The notice of funding availability is to be issued, and they're rolling these different programs out sequentially. So I don't know what would be the best avenue, but I think the funds are available to eligible entities that include states, MPOs, cities, counties. So it could be a combination. But the federal government in the other competitive programs are encouraging joint applications.
Okay,
So who takes the lead? That's something we would need to determine.
okay. I look forward to us all working on that together. You know,
And this is 5 years of funding, so
Right.
there's an amount that Congress has authorized for this year, but it could be that, FY '24 or '23 is a better time to go after it. That's also a determination we'll need to make. Or if we're not successful in year one, we'll follow up in year two.
Right, okay. Thank you. And there's the photo, which I do have to point out that since the first time this was shown in a presentation by Whit and Evan, that FDOT has cleaned the wall and done some sprucing up, because I kind of threw a fit about that. So it does look cleaner, but it's still a wall. And if you think about the perception and what is being ingrained in the minds of the children who play on the sports field at Campbell Park, what message is that sending to those children? I want to change that. Thank you. Does anyone else have any further questions or comments? All right, we have a motion on the floor to, I believe that the motion is to bring a resolution to full city council to accept the results of the study and move forward with the action plan.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Motion passes. Thank you. Thank you so much for your
Thank you.
time today.